So, what's up, everybody? Before we get started, have just a couple of little prizes to give away, just because I can. All right. So, in the past year or so, we've all heard a lot about a lot of breaches and big name companies getting tossed out, thrown down, punched in the eye, whatever. What's the biggest name company you can think of? RSA. Who, anyone else? HB Gary. Where was that? And Sony, all right. That wasn't in the past year. All right. So my name's Gillis Jones. This is me, as you can tell by that awesome headshot. I work at White Hat Security. I'm on the in the TRC. We do web application security. I've been doing e-commerce stuff for about 3 years now, and I've gotten a couple of bounties from Facebook and all kinds of fun stuff like that. And more importantly than anything else you'll learn about me, I'm a hacker. I am not a mathematician. I got into this because I had questions and got a lot of I don't knows. And like any hacker, I figured, hey, I need to find a solution. This is White Hat Security. We're one of the leaders in web application security, testing, continuous assessments, all that fun stuff. These are just a couple of the big name companies that have been breached just in the past year. You'll see a bunch of names from Sony to the New York Stock Exchange to government agencies. And you have to wonder, when big name companies get breached, what the, whether or not they actually release solid details on costs and whatnot. And this is one of my favorite quotes, by the way. It's not about math. It's about money. And way too many companies now are practicing what I like to call zombie financials, which is essentially the practice that was popularized back in the 60s, but it's kind of come to a head more recently as companies are fighting tooth and nail for higher stock prices and to yield return to their shareholders. It's basically concealing any losses that you make and twisting them on the books to make it look like a gain. It's basically raising the dead. And it can be summed up in a word, which is unreal. And one of the best examples of unreal accounting was from Enron back in the late 90s. And basically they had been twisting the numbers and creating subsidiaries and one-off companies at such a rate that they lost their money. And when that came to light, everything went to pieces and the company went under. All right, so in a typical breach, there are some solid losses, and the estimates that we have going around right now are generally unsourced. And they're just people pulling numbers out of a hat, essentially. Forrester cost loss estimate was from 2008. Their estimates were $90 to $305. Now, adjusted, with biannual inflation adjustments on these costs, it comes out to be about $356 on the high end of the breach. And so, to me, that is just as unrealistic as saying that, the cost per record is, $1. You have to find something in the middle. And nothing is a better example of that than a large scale breach that someone mentioned earlier, that was somewhere between 77 million and 100 million records that were actually breached. Now, the company reported over and over again that only $170 million were actually lost. Now, according to the Forrester scale, the number should have been closer to 9 billion, and on the high end, closer to 35.6 billion. Now, I'm not saying one's right. I'm not saying one's wrong. I'm just saying there has to be a middle ground where a sweet spot. And so what? Some numbers are getting fudged around. Is it that big of a deal? Yeah. If you're basing your budget requests for your security program on publicly cited numbers, whether it be from a random company X or random company Y, and they're underselling what they actually spent, you're getting the short end of the stick. And, to me, it seems to be a snowballing problem. If you report less, you get less. And the less you get, the more you'll actually spend in security spending. So I came up with a list of 8 points to actually look at after a breach. Now, in the interest of time, I'm only covering 4 because in my test presentation, it went for an hour and a half. So I'm only doing 4, and then I'm releasing a paper to have some of the other ones. If you're interested, come talk to me afterwards, and I'll go through every one of them with you. But the first one is personnel costs. Now, RSA breach.
Quick question: when you release that paper, are you going to create a model tool like this, an Excel spreadsheet? You can plug numbers into and get a cost out?
No.
Repeat your question.
All right. The question was if I was going to create a Excel spreadsheet where you could put in numbers and get a number out. No, because like I said, I'm not a mathematician. Honestly, cost estimates are very specialized and individualized per company. So, what works for company A will not work for company Y. I'm just providing a very general overview of what you need to look at in your cost accounting. So, unfortunately, no, there won't be a spreadsheet. Now, with the RSA breach this past year, they said that there were somewhere around 25,000 Secure ID clients. Now, these are corporate clients, and some of their larger clients have over 100,000 key fobs, per client. Now, if we assume, just for the sake of speculation, that no corporate client has less than 10,000 fobs, which, I think is a relatively safe estimation, just for the sake of modeling. That's 250 million devices that need to be replaced. Now, not even factoring in the cost of physical hardware replacement, think about the sheer manpower that would be required to index, to associate tokens, to double check the association of tokens, to package, to repackage, to pallet and ship 250 million devices. That's not a two-man job. Hell, that's not a 30-person job. That's a multiple business unit undertaking over several months. And, the average Fortune 500 salary is somewhere around $65,000 to $70,000 a year. Now, if you factor in overtime or anything like that, it comes out to be about $5,000 a month before overtime, and can easily mount up to be 15. And if you're paying 30 people, to be there for an entire month, overtime and whatnot, the expenses can get out of hand very quickly. And the second one is technical and infrastructure cost. During an attack, most of the time you'll have to replace some kind of hardware. You'll have to replace, put in place some kind of DDoS mitigation. And so many websites now are based off of cloud providers that, for every cycle that you consume over a certain level, you'll have to pay. And even if you didn't intend it, Amazon will charge you. So quick shirt question. Does anyone just name a cloud provider?
Amazon.
Oh, damn.
One note, though, that you're 600,000.
Yeah.
The average cost for an employee is 2.5 to 3 times that for a company. All the salaries is 1.5.
Oh, yeah, benefits and everything. Thank you for pointing that out. All right, so he pointed out quite accurately that even though the actual salary of an employee only may be $60,000 to $70,000, that the actual cost for the company for having them in could be 2 to 3 times that for additional benefits or whatever else. And I really love that because I'm trying to learn, and that's the whole purpose of this. It's the purpose of BSides. We're here to learn. All right. So you have to bring in consultants and all kinds of stuff to either do incident response or to fix your solutions or whatever. Now, if you take your total income and divide that by your by the amount of days, the duration of the attack, the amount of bandwidth consumed and the cost of the bandwidth, plus the amount of mitigation provider, such as Akamai or anyone else, and add in the consultant cost, your average cost there would be your cost per day. Now, interesting case study I came across was a local police department in the Midwest. This is a relatively small town. They have about, I think they have 10 to 15,000 people, but they had a 500-person policing force. Now, the hackers in this case bypassed their network control mechanisms and were able to access their SQL database, which essentially stored all of their police officer and violator information. So if you had ever been arrested, ever been pulled over, your information was in the database, including your social security number, your everything. And if you paid tickets, your credit was in there. This was not good for anybody. The incident took 4 to 6 weeks of consultancy work, and the estimated cost for a very, very small scale hack was $2 million just for consultants. Like, that's a real cost associated with breaches. And I just, when something like that happens, you definitely have to be, if you fall out of compliance, you have to be recertified. And, it doesn't matter whether it's a name line compliancy or not, PCI SOX, HIPAA, all the names we love to hate. With PCI especially, the initial cost of compliance can go up to $500,000. Now, God help you if you have to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, because the initial cost there can go up to $1.7 million just for initial compliance. Now, if you fall out of compliance and you have to be recertified, you essentially have to go through the entire compliant certification process again. Now, that's every time you get breached if you fall out of compliance. And with HIPAA, if you have to be HIPAA compliant, the penalties can be even worse, because if you're a hospital and you get breached, you could have to actually close your doors and not reopen, because HIPAA is evil. Now, how many of you heard about the anonymous stock exchange shenanigans back in October? Yeah? A couple people. All right, so that they took down the website for a total of a minute. Now, this shouldn't have been a big deal. It shouldn't have been a problem. Now, no stock trading was available for a minute. Let's just try and figure out for a second how much trading didn't happen. Now, if you take the amount of currency traded in one day and multiply it by the amount of minutes in a day times 7 times 60, you can come to a pretty safe estimate of a per minute cost of what the unrealized trading was. So in September 2011, the month prior to the attack, the reported amount of trading was 50.9 billion shares. Now, if you factor that into October's overall amount of trading, you divide by 21 days at 7 hours apiece. It comes out to be like 5 million per minute that isn't traded. Now, if you factor in that because of the outage, 1 minute on either side, a individual wasn't able to get a proper cost estimate of a particular share. Automated trading solutions wouldn't be able to get an accurate measure, so they wouldn't be able to trade. So I factored in a minute on either side. So the approximate trades that weren't able to be made were 17 million. Now, if each trade is $10 or $15, that comes to 170 million bucks that wasn't traded in that time. And 1 minute doesn't translate as easily mentally as, $170 million. Now, here's one that actually took me by surprise. Now, when you're breached, lawsuits are pretty much a given. If your client data is disclosed, no matter if it's a state-sponsored act or if it's an anonymous attack or whatever, your customers aren't going to be happy about it. Now, in 2011, there hasn't been any settled case law of breaches in 2011 because it takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years for a lawsuit, class action or otherwise, to gestate through the system. But for cases from 2008, the estimated amount per record was $1,000. Now, at least one, if not 2 or 3 cases have been settled that actually awarded class action status where they got $1,000 per record. Now, for 2011, it's kind of difficult to determine how many lawsuits have actually been filed because some of them are sealed, pending whether or not they are awarded class action status. But I'm going to show you a couple from 2008. Well, first of all, this is a rather entertaining one. There was a rather large bank this past year who their user management essentially on the end of a URL, they had your user number. Now, you could actually change 5 there to 6 and have complete access to someone else's account. Not only could you access it, you could transfer money. Now, I'm not sure how that got past the QA process, but regardless, it did, and they paid dearly for it. Now, initially they reported that 200,000 accounts were actually affected. And this is what got me interested in this in the first place. 200,000 accounts were affected after a lawsuit by the state of Connecticut. It actually came out that the number was 2 times as high as that. That actually 400,000 accounts had been affected. The company had willfully withheld 200,000 breach notifications. And 2.7 million was reported actually stolen, with 1% of the affected accounts actually being defrauded. And, that comes out to be about 4,000 customers or $700 an account. That seems to be a little bit whole of a number and kind of low, if you're actually actively stealing money. Now, another bank, I'm starting to see a trend here. in 2008 had to pay $350,000 to the state of Connecticut after a internal actor took information and sold it on the black market. Now, they had to pay $25,000 to any Connecticut resident who had to take proactive measure to prevent exploitation of their account. Now, they had to reimburse them any out-of-pocket expenses, fraudulent charges, and credit monitoring. And the actual insider was forced to pay like $1.2 million. Now, this bank in 2008 had a 24% market share of the bank market in Connecticut. There were 3.5 million residents. Now, if we estimate that 2.5 million are actually over 18 and are actually banking age, then there would be about 600,000 that were actually customers. Now, 600,000 people mandated to receive $25,000 each comes out to be about $15 billion. That's Connecticut alone. I would have liked to seen that reported. I would have liked to seen that and have that to show to my CIO, to be able to justify to my CFO that, hey, you want that happening to us? I don't think someone would be able to say no to that. $15 billion should put someone out of business. So I basically wanted to do this to try and show you that there's a lot of stuff that needs to be factored into a cost analysis, and there's more than this, but when you go back to your organization and inevitably you have a breach, look at what it costs you and think about the effect of not properly reporting it and what that could do to other people. And basically, the being breached can affect you so much more than the initial design of your network. These are all my sources for the presentation, if you happen to want to look at them. And thank you. Any questions? So
towards the beginning, you mentioned you called it the Forrester?
The Forrester report, yeah.
So what is that?
All right, so Forrester is a analyst firm that typically provides cost analysis and market analysis stuff for security and whatnot. They did a cost report back in 2008 where they estimated different organizational statuses and stuff and classified it by different industries and stuff. So it was something like $90, $105, and $305 per record that they cited the cost would be, and yeah. So, yes, ma'am. Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
In your research, do you think of any certain attack type or any certain attack
All right, so that wasn't something I actually researched. However, just gut instinct. Most of the lawsuits I've seen actually come across have been, things that resulted in SQL injection, where actual records were disclosed. Whereas, some, number rotation, insufficient authorization stuff could also result in it, but SQL injection would be my primary thought. Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't. That was a third-hand story, second-hand story. But they kind of asked me not to release any names or anything because they got owned pretty hard. But yeah, unfortunately, no. So.
So I wanted to, I'm an engineer, I tend to think while I'm receiving information. So 2 points. Number one, the RSA with the tokens. The number that you gave for replacing the tokens, if you assume that there's a cost to RSA of about $20 per token.
Yeah.
Consensus in the room, RSA tokens about $80 each? Yes, no, maybe? Okay. Yeah, okay. So we assume that the cost to build and distribute for RSA is about $20 each. That means the cost to RSA from that, if they went through and replaced all the tokens, would have been a nice healthy $5 billion.
Yep.
That doesn't include the cost to a small company. If you look at replacing an RSA token per employee and assume 1 minute per token, again, that's just an off-the-cuff estimate.
Yep.
That turns into 20 solid days of work, which is 1 man month.
Yep. So
Bathroom and another break.
the
If you actually bring the employee in to talk to you, that's 5 minutes per, so you're looking at 5 man months.
So the typical markup on the tokens, as I was able to find, like I said, there are 4 or 5 other categories that I wasn't able to cover because of previous time issues. But the markup, the average markup amount for those tokens was like I think 10 to 15%. So on a production cost of $20, the actual retail amount would be somewhere between 10 and 15 above that, so 30 to 35 is the average retail that I was able to find online. Now, no, just the raw tokens. Yeah, absolutely, because in that. Actually, hold on. As I try not to knock anyone out. But yeah, so cost of replacement, you have to factor in the actual physical production of the replacement, the cost to get it into the customer's hand, as well as any loss on the retail markup. So you're getting into a 3-factor cost analysis there for just replacement. Anyone else?
I think part of the challenge is really trying to quantify and qualify the customer attrition and the cost of the customer. You know what? If I'm an RSA customer and it costs RSA whatever, I don't care. I care about my impact and my bottom line to implement whatever changes are required to remediate something that we're sort of appearing.
So one cost estimate that that actually I'm kind of proud of was in order to estimate soft losses, which is customer change. You take the customer spending for the 12 months prior to the breach, then you basically divide that by by 12, and then subtract the amount of customer spending for the month after the breach, and the amount of change between those two is the actual number for the estimated customer change, or the customer confidence loss. If,
Let's say BlackBerry had a breach a year ago, right?
yeah,
I don't think that we can then say, okay, hey, guess what? We've lost X amount of customers because of the data breach. There are other complicated factors, right?
yeah. So the estimated the numbers I've seen for that are anywhere from like 5 to 7% customer attrition for an actual security breach, but those were relatively unsourced numbers, so take them with a grain of salt.
Did you find any difference between BSC and B2B?
I'm sorry?
Did you find any difference between business to consumer versus business to business?
So all of the actual analysis. Yeah. Is there any way we could turn off these lights or down some?
Yeah, we'll try to dim them a little bit.
All right. So the analysis that I did was actually like business to consumer. I'm not really privy to any business to business stuff, but that's something I'm definitely going to look at in the future. So. So to be 100%. Oh, okay. So the question was where the liability would lie in the RSA example in the case that one of the companies got breached. So honestly, I can't really speak to that. Again, going to gut instinct, it would probably be the you know what? Yeah, unfortunately, I can't speak to that. I can't even start to think what the what the intricacies there would be. Absolutely. But that was an awesome question. So. All right. All right. Impress me with something business related for a raffle thing. Anybody? Alex.
Yeah.
Anything.
Sure. All right. So there's actually a economies of scale that happened. I can't exactly say through, but when you get to number of records, depending on the size of the breach, you actually drop from the almost absurd 200 whatever dollars per breach to depending on the demographic.
Absolutely.
Under 20.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To some effect, yeah.
Corporation or organization. Right. So FinServ, right? FinServ is going to be higher, right? And it also depends on the nation of FinServ. So insurance companies, greater than a bank. That's why I didn't know what.
I'm curious with the idea of the rapid protection being as well. So since we'll go with your example of this, that 110 or 170 million record breach, what's the demographic
I got two for you.
So here's your other clue. This is not my organization, right? Everybody on the stream, this is not Alex's organization. Typically, folks are using somewhere between 10 and 30% of people will actually utilize yeah, thank you. Whatever you buy them, right? To handle your reputation. I'm dropping packets. Whether you buy them identity theft protection, whatever you do for their accounts, right? So not only does it drop based on economies of scale, but then you have another multiplier that says, well, actually, yeah. So, I mean, if I had $1 for every time somebody came to me with a $100 billion loss because they multiplied straight Panama numbers by,
Yeah.
you know, I
Absolutely.
could have $100 billion make up their loss. Sure.
But it also depends on the way that you contact people. If you call the people, updates higher. If you mail them, people are getting a little bit more complacent. And you know, if, let's say, one person has enough for mail bomb.
Well, absolutely, and it's in your best interest economically. And because the fraud level, if you put it out at 2% or less than 1% fraud, actual fraud level based on hundreds of millions of records, it's not in my economic best interest as the organization that suffers a breach to actually call and really care about folks unless the folks that I really care about, let's say I'm a boutique with a high value clientele.
Well, so if you're looking at a inbound call amount that is matching the amount of records that were actually disclosed, if you're looking at 10% of the actual disclosed record holders calling into you, and you have to assign a call center or something like that, you're getting numbers per call, phone numbers of $5 a call, whatever, and you get billions of records disclosed. You're looking at $200 or $300 million just in phone calls, much less class action lawsuits or anything else. So 10-15 billion dollar number in that case, I think, is somewhat reasonable.
Could be.
But
The cost, like you said, the cost accounting is going to vary by organization.
absolutely.
Any independent organization can't measure it. It's just difficult to build it across.
Oh, what's that?
In your research, did you do anything that, like, besides the immediate loss of with the fines and people leaving, with studies being done that say that if people have a bad experience with the company, they'll tell 10 people, whereas if they have a good experience, they only tell 2. Did you do any research on the loss over time of through word of mouth, people telling people about bad experiences and people leaving the company even if they weren't breached, and even beyond that?
So, no, the closest thing to that I've seen was there was a report before Congress back in 2006 that said that basically after a breach there was a attrition rate of people that would absolutely sever their relationship of, I think, 15%, and that may sever it of about the same. But as to that exact thing, I don't have any research into that. But it's an interesting thought. I'm not sure how you would actually come to those numbers, though. Anyone else?
Is SEC filings probably the only way to start to figure out the transparency issue?
I'm not going to comment on that. Yeah. But, you don't want a shirt? All right, guys. I tell you what, you get along one time, and then the next time,